Absolutely nothing. That's how Christine Wansley described what she found when she finally got her hands on her son's phone and opened his Snapchat. Not one saved video, not one picture, nothing from an app her son used constantly, wiped clean inside a window of less than 24 hours, which happens to be exactly how long Snapchat content typically stays visible before it disappears on its own. That single detail, more than almost anything else in this case, is what pushed Nolan's parents to stop waiting quietly for official updates and start speaking publicly on national television about exactly what didn't add up to them. And in the days since, this case has moved through several more chapters: a nationally broadcast funeral, a public reward for information, and a forensic process now finally getting underway on the very phone this update centers around. Tonight, we're going to walk through all of it carefully. What Nolan's parents actually said about that phone, what's technically possible when it comes to recovering deleted data, how this family said goodbye to their son this week, and where the investigation stands right now. We're also going to take a moment to directly address the flood of unverified claims and theories that have attached themselves to this case, because separating what's real from what isn't has never mattered more than it does right now. If you're new to this channel, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications. We've been covering this case from the beginning, verifying every claim before bringing it to you, and there's more coming as new developments are confirmed. If tonight's update helps you actually understand this case, drop a like. It makes a real difference in getting careful, fact-checked reporting like this in front of more people. Let's start with the moment this detail first became public. Christine and Elmore Wansley sat down with Michael Strawn on Good Morning America, alongside civil rights attorney Ben Crump, to speak directly about their son's death for the first time on national television. It was, by any measure, one of the more difficult things a grieving parent can do, laying out, in front of millions of people, exactly why the explanation they'd been given for their son's disappearance didn't sit right with them. Christine described the process of actually getting Nolan's phone. It hadn't simply been handed over. According to the family, they had to track the device themselves and send someone to physically retrieve it from a house where several people had gathered. Once they finally had it in hand, Christine and her sister went through it together, starting with Snapchat. Nolan had 2 separate accounts, she said. Both were essentially empty. No saved videos, no pictures, nothing from the day he disappeared, despite the fact that, in her words, she knew exactly how her son used that app when he was out having fun with friends. He documented things. That's not speculation on her part. That's a mother describing a pattern of behavior she'd observed for years. And on the one day it mattered most, that pattern was completely absent. Even Christine's sister, looking at the same empty account, told her directly that it looked suspicious. It's worth pausing here to explain, in plain terms, why this detail carries the weight it does. Snapchat, as a platform, is built around content that disappears automatically after a short window, typically within 24 hours unless a user specifically saves it. So finding an account with nothing saved isn't automatically unusual on its own. That's actually how the app is designed to work by default. What makes this specific situation different is the contrast Christine described. A son who, by her account, consistently saved and shared content when he was out with friends, on a day when he was, by every account, actively out with friends, celebrating a holiday, with people taking group photos throughout the day. Separately, the family has said that some text messages also appeared to have been deleted from Nolan's phone before it reached their hands. It's important to be precise about what's actually confirmed here and what isn't. What's confirmed is this. Nolan's mother has said publicly, repeatedly, and consistently that both his Snapchat accounts were cleared and that some texts appeared to be missing. What's not yet confirmed is who deleted anything, when it happened, or why. Those are the exact questions a forensic digital examination is meant to answer, and that examination, through the joint inspection process both the family and the district attorney's office agreed to, is specifically what's now underway. This is actually where the story gets genuinely interesting from a technical standpoint, because deleting something from a phone doesn't mean what most people assume it means. When you delete a message, a photo, or a Snapchat conversation from your own device, you're generally only removing the pathway your phone uses to display that file locally. The underlying data frequently still exists somewhere else, either in a deeper, unallocated section of the phone's own storage or on the platform's own servers, depending on the app and how quickly that data gets overwritten by new activity. Retired FBI agent Kieran Ramsey, speaking about this case specifically, has said investigators may be able to recover multiple layers of data from Nolan's Snapchat account, even material that had been deleted from the visible interface. That's not a guarantee. Recovery success depends heavily on how much time has passed and whether the underlying data has already been overwritten by newer activity. But it's a real, technically grounded possibility, not wishful thinking. It generally works like this. Investigators or forensic examiners can request that a platform preserve account data before it's automatically purged, and then, through a proper legal request, obtain whatever server-side records still exist, separate entirely from whatever is or isn't visible on the physical device itself. This is precisely why the joint phone examination both sides agreed to matters so much. If deleted content genuinely can be recovered at a deeper level, a coordinated, properly documented forensic examination, with both the family's experts and law enforcement's experts watching the same extraction happen in real time, is exactly the kind of process capable of finding it, and finding it in a way that holds up if the case eventually reaches a courtroom. During that same GMA interview, Ben Crump raised another piece of this puzzle, the video that had already been circulating online, which he said appeared to capture an argument, with someone audible saying something about wanting their phone back. At the time of that interview, Crump attributed that voice to Nolan directly. We've covered in a previous update how that specific claim was later disputed by name. A friend who was on the island that day came forward publicly to say the voice on that recording was actually his own, not Nolan's. And Crump himself has since acknowledged that correction and said his team is working to determine, through actual audio analysis, whose voice is really on that tape. That update is worth remembering here, because it's a good example of exactly the pattern we need to stay alert to throughout this entire case. An initial claim, stated with real confidence, that later required real correction once more information came in. What Crump's broader point was, both in that original interview and in the corrected version since, doesn't actually depend on that specific video. It's this. It is, by his account, extremely uncommon for a teenager to voluntarily separate from his phone, especially on a remote island with no other way to call for help or coordinate a ride. Whether or not that particular video captures Nolan's voice, the underlying question Crump is raising is a fair one to ask. Why would Nolan, or anyone in his situation, choose to leave his device behind if he was genuinely planning to stay on the island longer, on his own, without immediate transportation back? Sheriff John Ledbetter addressed this same question directly around the same time, telling GMA that Nolan's phone had not yet formally been turned over to investigators at that stage. He described it as potentially significant, a piece of the puzzle authorities hadn't fully gotten their hands on yet. Ledbetter has since confirmed that the 3 friends who were with Nolan on the boat have been formally interviewed as part of the investigation, and that early accounts from those interviews indicate Nolan told the group he intended to find another ride back. Crump has directly disputed that specific characterization, pointing back to Katie's account, which we detailed in a previous update. An account that describes Nolan stating an intention to return with his friends, not the reverse. That contradiction between what the friends reportedly told investigators and what Katie has separately described remains one of the central unresolved threads in this entire case, and it's exactly the kind of question a full, completed investigation is meant to sort out. Elmore Wansley, Nolan's father, used part of that same GMA appearance to speak about who his son actually was and why the explanation being floated for his disappearance never made sense to him personally. He described raising Nolan with a simple, consistent rule. If you go somewhere with a group, you come back with that group. That wasn't presented as an abstract parenting philosophy. It was presented as something Nolan had internalized and lived by, according to his father, every single time, without exception. Hearing that his son had supposedly chosen, on his own, to stay behind on a remote barrier island without his friends, without a phone, without an established plan to get back to shore, that account simply didn't match the young man his father had spent 18 years raising. Christine echoed that same sentiment in her own words. She's been careful, in every interview she's given, not to claim she knows exactly what happened to her son. What she has said consistently is that she wants a real, thorough investigation, the same level of scrutiny and care that would be given to any other family in this situation, regardless of who they are or where they're from. "We just want honesty and transparency," she said. "We want that same respect that would be given to anybody else." That's not an accusation aimed at any specific individual. It's a mother asking for a fair process, which is a request worth taking seriously entirely on its own terms. This week also brought something this family had been dreading since the moment they got that first phone call: laying their son to rest. The funeral was held Monday at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, with visitation beginning at 9 that morning and the service following at 11. Hundreds of people came. Nearly the entire high school football roster was there, many dressed in black and blue, the colors of Nolan's team at the family's specific request. A slideshow of photos played before the service began, set to gospel music. Images of Nolan with his friends, his teammates, and his family. Christine spoke first, addressing her son directly. "Your absence has left an emptiness that can never truly be filled," she said. She described the specific way he made people feel, seen, welcomed, valued. "He could lift your confidence with just a few words and make you feel like you belong," she said. She thanked God, in her words, for the 18 years they were given with him, and closed with something that felt less like a eulogy and more like a promise. "Be like Nolan. Be the light that brightens the lives of those around you." Elmore spoke as well, describing how proud he was of the young man his son had become, and how Nolan had served as a model for his younger brothers, someone they looked up to, someone who showed them in practical, everyday ways how to carry themselves. Reverend Al Sharpton delivered the eulogy, and it moved well beyond a traditional remembrance into a direct, public call for answers. He announced a reward, funded in part by filmmaker Tyler Perry, who also covered the full cost of the service, for anyone with new information about the circumstances surrounding Nolan's death. Sharpton framed the case within a longer, painful history, invoking the memory of Emmett Till and Medgar Evers as he spoke about why so many people across the country have been watching this specific case so closely. "Some of us remember what happened in Mississippi," he said. "Before we can medicate and heal today, we've got to look at your history." Attorney Ben Crump spoke as well, leading the crowd in a chant of "Nolan's life mattered," while Christine wept into her husband's shoulder beside him. Crump laid out the case in its simplest, starkest terms. "They went out on the boat came back, and Nolan washed up on the shore 2 days later dead," he said. "Wouldn't you want answers?" That's a fair question, and it's worth sitting with on its own, separate from any specific theory about what those answers might turn out to be. A young man went out with friends and never came home. Whatever the eventual explanation turns out to be, whether it's a tragic accident, something more complicated, or something in between, his family is entitled to know what actually happened, through a process that's genuinely thorough rather than rushed. Notable figures attended the service as well, including filmmaker Spike Lee and former NFL player Terrell Owens, alongside a broad gathering of black clergy and civil rights figures from across the country. At a press conference following the service, Crump confirmed that both the independent autopsy and the official state autopsy remain pending, more than 2 weeks after Nolan's body was recovered. He said he continues working directly alongside the local district attorney's office on the joint phone examination we've covered in previous updates. Now, it's important to address something directly, because this case has generated an enormous amount of online commentary, and not all of it has been careful or responsible. In the weeks since Nolan's death, a wide range of claims have circulated across social media, some from people who say they have direct knowledge of the area, some built entirely on second-hand rumor, and at least one deeply concerning theory suggesting organized hate group involvement based on nothing more than unnamed people supposedly talking about it online. That specific claim has not been confirmed by any law enforcement agency, any named journalist, or any court document, and responsible reporting on this case should not repeat or amplify it without real verification behind it. We're not going to detail it further here, and we'd encourage real caution around any account of this case that treats anonymous, unverifiable claims like that as established fact. Doing so doesn't help this family get real answers. It just adds more noise to a story that already has more than enough of it. That same caution matters just as much when it comes to the young men who were on that boat trip with Nolan. As of everything publicly confirmed right now, no charges have been filed against anyone. No person has been officially named a suspect. And investigators have said repeatedly that they have not found evidence of foul play at this stage in the process, while also stressing just as clearly that the investigation remains active and far from finished. It's entirely reasonable and honestly necessary to ask hard questions about inconsistencies in this case, about a phone that came back with content missing, about a timeline that still has real gaps in it. It is a very different thing to declare guilt, publicly and by name, against specific people who haven't been charged with anything. That distinction isn't just a legal formality. It's the difference between demanding real accountability and causing real harm to people who may ultimately turn out to have done nothing wrong. This case has already generated documented threats against multiple people connected to it, serious enough to draw federal attention, as we covered in a previous update. Responsible coverage means asking hard questions without becoming part of the reason those threats keep happening. Ben Crump, for his part, has continued to frame his position carefully, even while pushing hard for answers. He's pointed to Mississippi's own difficult history as context for why this family's distrust of an early, quick conclusion is understandable, without stating outright that any specific individual caused Nolan's death. That's a meaningful distinction, and it's one worth applying to how all of us discuss this case going forward, including right here on this channel. So where does all of this actually leave the investigation as it stands today? The state autopsy remains pending. The independent autopsy the family commissioned, conducted in Washington, D.C., specifically to remove any question of local bias, also remains pending. The joint forensic examination of Nolan's phone is moving forward, with both the family's investigators and law enforcement's own examiners set to review the same extracted data together, closing the gap that existed when Sheriff Ledbetter first said the device hadn't yet been turned over. The case is expected to be presented to a grand jury once the Sheriff's Department's investigation concludes, a standard procedural step for unnatural deaths in this county, not, on its own, confirmation of criminal wrongdoing. And Nolan's family, alongside their independent investigative team, continues actively gathering information from anyone willing to come forward, now with a public financial reward attached specifically to encourage exactly that. What's actually changed with this update isn't a resolution. It's a fuller picture of exactly what this family is pointing to, why they've pushed as hard as they have, and how they've chosen to say goodbye to their son in the middle of all of it. A mother who opened her son's phone expecting to find the digital footprint of an ordinary holiday, and instead found almost nothing. A father who cannot reconcile the son he raised with the account of a young man who simply chose to stay behind. A church full of people wearing his team's colors, listening to his mother ask them never to stop saying his name. And a formal, agreed-upon forensic process now finally underway, specifically to determine whether anything can still be recovered from that phone, and if so, what it actually shows. None of that proves what happened to Nolan Wells in his final hours. It does explain, clearly and in his family's own words and actions, exactly why they've refused to simply accept the first explanation they were given, and why they've pushed as hard as they have, through official channels and their own, for a deeper, more complete look at the evidence. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was, by every account from the people who actually knew him, a genuinely good young man, a teammate, a friend, someone people describe as having lifted others up rather than torn them down. His family has now laid him to rest, in a service they deliberately built around celebrating exactly that. And they're continuing to push, through an official investigation, an independent one running alongside it, and a forensic phone examination now finally underway, for a real, complete answer to the one question that still hasn't been answered. What actually happened to their son on Horn Island? We'll keep following this case as the autopsy results are released, as the phone examination produces findings, and as this investigation moves toward a grand jury. We'll bring you what's actually confirmed from named sources, and nothing less than that. If this update helped you understand this case more clearly, subscribe to True Crime Vault so you don't miss what comes next, and let us know in the comments what you think investigators should be prioritizing as this digital evidence gets examined. We'll see you in the next update.